Welcome back, everyone. We will be starting the next session shortly. Just a reminder, information about how to submit questions and how to access French captions can be found in the chat. Our first speaker this hour is Lawrence Gunther. Lawrence is a conservationist, outdoor writer, broadcaster, blogger, and filmmaker whose work has been recognized for numerous awards. Blind from the age of 8, Lawrence's work focuses on documenting Canada's amazing natural resources through visualization and storytelling. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Lawrence Gunther is my name. I go by he, him. For those of you who can't see, I'm about a 6'3" guy, 210 pounds. I have a silver hair and a beard. And I have a guide dog. He's a CNIB guide dog. He's half Labrador, half Golden Retriever. And I started the charity Bluefish Canada. It's about the future of fish, fresh water, and connecting to nature through fishing. I love fishing. For me, as a blind person, it's all about feel the bite. And I do really well at it because I visualize the underwater world. More about that to come. We do videos, we've made documentaries, long form, short form documentaries. We specialize in educating people, and a lot of people like to be informed these days through social media. So we do a lot of that through our charity, but we also do a lot of hands-on because nothing beats getting people's feet wet and really out there and experiencing the outdoors for real. One of the ways we do this is one of our initiatives is the blind fishing boat. It's something we started in 16 years ago. It's an actual plastic electric fishing boat that everything is accessible on it. It has talking GPS, talking compasses and depth sounders and sensors and so on. Actually, it's pretty much almost self-driving now. Next slide. So we're going to talk about blind outdoor orienting on trails and water. You know, this is something that's really big to everyone who visits a park. Really, if you think about it, what's the number one thing that brings a little anxiety and excitement when you get out of your bus, car, off your bike, and you're in a park for the first time? It's, are we doing that trail? How long is that trail? Are we going to get lost? Are we going to find our way back? Are we going down that river? Are we going out on that lake? It's all about getting out there and getting back. So much of that, our park visits are about that. How do you do that as a person with vision loss? What's been tried? What works? What doesn't work? Where are we now? And where do we need to go? And there's a little picture of me with my guide dog on the ice there. Next slide. My vision loss experience started at around age 8 when I was first registered blind. I lost my central vision at that point. It was determined my central vision was sort of fading out, but I had a tremendous amount of peripheral vision. I learned a lot about, in the regular school system as someone who was legally blind with no central vision. I learned a lot about social aspects of having a disability. That really was driven home for me throughout my public school career and 9 years of college and university. It was in my early 20s that the vision loss spread out to my peripheral vision, and I lost my functional sight because up until then I could still pretty much do a lot of things just by looking or expanding or magnifying vision. But in my early 20s, I had to learn how to do things without looking, to live life as a non-sighted person. So I learned Braille, got a guide dog, and a few other tricks that allowed me to get along. And then in my late 40s, it spread to the point where I no longer have a night-day vision. I can't see a campfire, a sunset. So, that whole of vision loss went into a whole nother area of mental health and things like that, challenges, and so I've really experienced a whole range of all types of challenges throughout my life, all ranges of sight and sight loss. And it's helped me develop some skills, I think, that I'm trying to pass on to the public now in terms of visualization and visualization of the underwater world, those worlds that really none of us see. Next slide. My outdoor experience started as a child. My father had bought an old homestead, 200-acre homestead. We built a summer house on it, a pond. It had 110 acres of forest that we reforested and 80 acres of hardwood maples, and it backed onto 10,000 acres of crown land. And I learned that I learned that 200 acres like the back of my hand. I learned that pond. I watched that pond evolve over my life. And it got me into scouts. I was into scouts and got into canoeing a lot into ventures later on, a higher level of scouts. We did some pretty cool canoe races. We actually canoed from Toronto, Ontario to Prince Edward Island on a canoe trip in 1977 for the World Scout Jamboree. Blind sailing, kayaking, sailboarding, snowmobiling. I love snowmobiling. Now it's not so much driving anymore. Hiking, a lot of hiking. And but I love being on the water most of all, whether it's in my kayak, a canoe, or my fishing boat, my blind fishing boat. I'm also, full transparency, I'm sponsored by some marine industry companies and some fishing companies for my fishing activities. I used to do a lot of tournament fishing, not so much anymore. But I really want to just focus my life to helping people understand that we have a stewardship responsibility, that we have a One Health responsibility with nature. Next slide, please. Slide 5. So if we think about accommodations for people with disabilities, and especially for people with vision loss, low vision, blind, deafblind, there's certain ways we can do it just naturally. Like if you have limited sight or no sight, you're probably going to go in the front of the canoe. You're not going to be spotting rocks, but you're the engine up there, and the person at the back of the canoe is going to stern. If you have some vision, enough to stern the boat and steer it down along the shoreline, you'll be in the back, and the person up the front will be the sighted person spotting for rocks and hazards. Leading and following, if you have some vision, you'll be guiding the person without the vision. If you have no vision, you'll be following someone else. That's just natural ways to do it, and how to hold and each other, how to rope off or use sticks or handholds to guide the person single file, side by side. There's all sorts of many variations and techniques for moving down a trail as a person with a vision loss with a sighted guide. If you're on a sailboat, they have all sorts of blind racing on sailboats and blind sailing with different types of levels of blindness, and that determines the category you race in. The blind person will be working the tiller, steering the boat. They use the wind on their face, the feel of the waves on the hull, and the other blind person will be pulling on the sheets, the ropes that raise and lower the mainsail, or rope off the boom. There's all sorts of ways of doing that, and that's fully accessible in many ways. Canoe portaging, I love portaging, and of course the traditional method is someone carries the canoe and the other person carries all the gear. But if you're blind, you got a canoe on your head and you don't see where you're going, that can make for some bumpy trail crossing. So 2 people carry the canoe and you carry your gear at the same time. One canoe, 2 canoe heads. You put the blind person at the back, the sighted person at the front, and you just follow the canoe. Just follow the canoe. You can't get lost. Roping off, if you're on any sort of precipices, climbing, mountain climbing, rock climbing, roping off is a great way to do it. It's easy to go up anything as a blind person. Coming back down, if you're on your hands and feet, it's easy. But if you're walking down, that's a lot challenging. When you walk up a mountain, you feel right away with your feet, with your hands, with your stick, how far you have to take each step, how high you have to take each step. When you're coming down, not so easy, because you got to reach way down. Is that 2 feet down, or is that 20 feet down? This is where it gets a lot more technical, and there's a lot more instruction, but it can totally be done. Sighted guides are important in all this, but do they have to be? And it's great if you can get out there and have less sighted guides than more. Descriptive narrative, your sighted guide can talk you through it, can hold you through it, hold your hand, rope off, all sorts of ways. Hiking poles are a great way, substitute your guide dog with your guide dog, without your guide dog, with a white cane, paint your hiking poles white. Hiking poles are fantastic. Tandem bikes are fantastic. Tandem mountain bikes, they don't have a lot of those for reasons that are technical, but on a good trail, any reasonable trail, a tandem bike can do well. Next slide. So we're going to get into a little more about the aids and devices that apply to orienting on trails and water in parks. Guide dogs is the first one, my favorite. I love dogs. I've been using a guide dog now for 37 years. Different dogs, not the same one. But, when you're on a guide dog, with a guide dog, you don't always have to hold the harness. Holding the harness means the dog's beside you. If you need to go single file and the dog has to go in front of you, you need to let go of that harness or you're going to be bent way over. And that's where you have to get used to working with your dog with a leash and a stick. You can't make the dog guide you just with the leash, but they will try. You just can't fault them if something goes wrong, like you bang into something. That's why you should have a hiking pole and a guide dog. I do this for cross-country skiing, for snowshoeing, for many different ways, all seasons out there with my dog. Sighted volunteers, of course, you know, you can bring a volunteer, someone who's dedicated, who's devoted. You might not even know them. Ski hawks, all sorts of blind skiing organizations, trail running organizations, where you meet your sighted guide when you show up at the event that morning and you spend the day together. And at the end of the day, well, you just made a new friend. Binoculars, who doesn't want to bring some sight magnification to do some bird watching? You know, all those same tools apply for people with low vision. Contrasting clothing, lights, you know, if you're in a busy area, snowboarding, snowshoeing, or skiing down a hill, tobogganing, it's good to have some contrasting clothing so people can identify you as a non-sighted individual. Talking compasses are great tools. There's tons of them out there now, but they're all on your smartphones for the most part. There's not many that are actual standalone talking compasses. Talking GPS, again, many versions of that on the compass, on your smart devices, but not a lot alone. You know, there's just a couple that are actually specific talking GPS systems for the blind. Artificial intelligence, obstacle recognition, that's just starting to come along, and that's going to open up some exciting new opportunities for sure. And remote real-time guidance, we have a few programs where you connect with someone behind a computer who's looking through your camera and talking to you through your earpiece and telling you what's coming up ahead. They have that now for people to get around in towns, in cities, in buildings, and as well on park trails as well. You just need to have cellular connectivity. Next slide. Accessible by design, right? So this is where you build in the accessibility, making the need for accessible devices or volunteers unnecessary. So things like tactile paths. So you have a nice path that's distinguished from the ground around you through a special gravel or pavement, something that, you know, you can just walk down that path and you can turn around, come back, or you can keep going, but you're not going to get lost because you're not going to leave the path. Railings and ropes, as a person without sight, if you can, you don't need to have the paths necessarily, but the ropes, it's something you can follow with your hand. A railing, a rope, it's not so much to hold you up. It can be an assistance in that regard as well. But if it's just a sighted guide technique, you got to make sure that that's understood, and that can get you around. But, you know, if you're doing a 3-mile hike, a rope or railing might not be that doable. It's smooth, step-free. You know, what's good for wheelchair users is good for blind people, good for all people. Braille, large print signage, that's great. The thing is, though, you have to be able to find the signage. If you're on your own, if you're low vision blind and you don't see where the signs are, you know, it doesn't matter if they're large print or Braille. You need to find them, get close to them to be able to read them. And so that's the challenge there. Kind of a catch-22. Audio narrated tours, you know, more and more parks are providing you with a device with a headset, and you wear it, and some of it has GPS triggered data, or some of it you push in the number based on the sign of the thing you're standing in front of, and it tells you what you're looking at, what's around you, gives you the history, gives you the background, gives you a deeper understanding of how it was made or who's responsible, all of that stuff. And that can really help you become a storyteller for the people you're with, to relay that information. Audio beacons and buoys, there's more of this type of technology going on. These things are battery driven, using Bluetooth or RFID, ways to communicate wirelessly to your handheld device, so that as you're moving along, it triggers information, it sends information to your handheld device, and you don't have to download anything in advance. All of a sudden your phone is telling you what you're passing, what's around you. GPS waypoints, you know, this is something we're going to get into more about, but I really think, you know, GPS is a much stronger tool for navigating on trails and water than a compass. You know, if you're with a compass, you can be heading north-northwest, 229 degrees. and you can, point your phone in that direction and keep going in that direction, but that doesn't compensate for drift to the side. The magnetic North Pole is a long way away, and it's not going to tell you if you're drifting to the side. On the other hand, waypoints using GPS, it's not a line like a compass. It's just a string of dots, and you navigate from one dot to the other. And there's some downsides to that as well. You'll go in a straighter line because you're literally going from one GPS point to the next, but you only get a 10-meter accuracy rate. So if you're 10 meters to the left of the waypoint or 10 meters to the right of the waypoint, or which is always the case, the waypoint tells you you've arrived when you're still 10 meters before you actually got there. So the accuracy of GPS waypoints is not terrific. Pre-recorded GPS routes is more and more devices are being able to share those, so you can get this information, download the waypoints with the information that goes along the waypoints for a trail, and that can be really helpful. This is an area where we can really advance in, I think, to improve park accessibility. Slide 8, risk mitigation, litigation. Whenever you're dealing with volunteers, the public, people with low vision, blindness, who's taking responsibility should something happen? If a blind person bumps into a sighted person, knocks them off the trail. If a sighted guide drops the blind person off a cliff. If a blind person falls down when they're being guided by a sighted volunteer and hurts themselves. Waivers and consent and acknowledgement. There's a lot of challenges, and I think a lot of these legal issues still need to be sorted out, because you don't want to have these things become barriers. Things like backcountry skiing. I know there's a blind person in Western Canada who's taking people blind backcountry skiing. Now, for those of you who've never backcountry skied, when you get to the top of the mountain, you ski back down the mountain, no trails. The first 2/3 of the mountain, it's just snow and drop-offs. The last third, you're skiing between trees, and there's no trails. So you don't want to be falling into a giant tree well all under the area underneath the tree where there's no snow. That can be a 20-foot drop. Whitewater kayaking, rafting, same thing. Mountain climbing and hiking. Anything you can think of outdoors has risk. But if you want to do it, you should be ready to assume the risk. But if there's a promise of some sort of accommodation and so on, and that doesn't work, it's failing you because it's not working as advertised. Well, there's some litigation issues there. Yeah, let's see here. Slide 9. And so I'm just saying thank you here. I might be a little bit ahead in my timing, but I really think, just to sum up, that orienting on the water, on trails, on rivers, in parks is such a huge part of the park experience. Hiking and rafting and paddling and sailing and boating. This is what we do when we go to parks, right? That's really what we do. It's what really gets people's outdoor juices flowing, really makes them feel alive. And yet that's something we haven't done a lot of investigation in yet. We've talked a lot about wheelchair accessibility paths, and that's great, but I think we really need to spend a lot more time dealing with how do we make these paths more user-friendly to people with low vision blindness. The population is getting older, the number of blind people, low vision people is going to start growing exponentially, and as the population ages. We need to be on top of this. We need to make sure it's usable for everybody. And if we create this system for blind, low vision people, you can be pretty sure that everyone's going to take advantage of this. Everyone's going to want to have these really advanced GPS downloadable routes with waypoints and information about where you are, and a little bit maybe interactive. So if you veer off, it can help you correct and get back on trail. Artificial intelligence is going to come into this, including object recognition. There's going to be so much great news on this coming real soon, I'm sure about it. I'm Lawrence Gunther. If you want to know more about me, visit lawrencegunther.com or visit my charity, bluefishcanada.ca. We have a podcast called the Bluefish Radio Show. We have a podcast for the blind, low vision called Outdoors with Lawrence Gunther. And visit if you want to know more about orienting on water. or fishing, visit blindfishingboat.com. Do we have time for questions?
Thank you, Lawrence, so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but we will collect the questions and we can send those on to you. If you are able to respond to them, that would be fantastic.
For sure. Yeah, happy to do that. Sorry for going over time, you guys.
That's all right. I fully agree with everything you said. It's an exciting time, and we'll see a lot more changes come in soon on the trails.
Fantastic. Yeah, I agree. Thank you for having me.